Welcome to the Red Sneaker Podcast, your guide to success in the worlds of writing and publishing. Now, here's your host, best-selling author and founder of the Red Sneaker Writers Center, William Bernhardt.
Hello, Red Sneaker Writers. This is the 30th episode, a landmark for the Red Sneaker Writer Podcast, going out on October 21st, 2019. This podcast is for Red Sneaker Writers, people who are serious about having a writing career and want some practical knowledge to help them do it. There is all kinds of news from the world of books to talk about this time. Plus, I have a very special guest interview with Dan Millman, who many of you probably know best as the author of The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. A landmark in the world of memoir and inspiration, was a bestseller, became a feature film with Nick Nolte, went on to inspire many other books. I talked to Dan about how he crafted what began as a memoir into a book that made such an indelible impression. But first, let's get to all that news. I'm going to start with this story in part because it literally just broke this morning as I'm recording this podcast, and also because it's a continuation of other stories we've talked about on previous podcasts involving accusations of intellectual theft or plagiarism, sometimes involving prominent authors. Here's another such case, this time involving the very well-known and well-respected author Jojo Moyes, that's Moyes, probably best known for her romantic novel, Me Before You, which also became a film, which my wife adored and many people went to, I think in part because it starred Emilia Clarke, the actress who played Daenerys on Game of Thrones. Anyway, the author has a new book out called The Giver of Stars, which is a novel, but it's based upon a historical incident involving the real-life so-called Packhorse Library Project in Kentucky, basically women on horseback delivering books in remote areas. Turns out that this is not the first book to touch on this subject. There was a previous book by an author named Kim Michelle Richardson that took off from the same historical incident. Well, so what, you may be thinking? Nobody owns history. Certainly more than one historical novel can come out of the same incident, and that's true. But what some people online are saying, particularly on BuzzFeed, is that it goes deeper than that. Nobody has accused Moyes of actual word-for-word plagiarism, taking pieces of language, but they have pointed out some startling similarities in plot developments, characters, which are not directly based on any historical antecedents, so it seems like an amazing coincidence. Well, here's the fact. Coincidences happen sometimes, and it's really not that startling that two people working from the same historical incident might come up with some similar ideas. I'm not weighing in on this suit. I don't know nearly enough about it to do so, but I am concerned that someone so prominent could be subjected to so much negativity online, which brings me to my point. I've made it before and will say it again. Red Sneaker Writers, be careful. Of course, you're going to research every book you write, even if it's not a historical novel, but be very careful. Don't do anything that could even remotely be accused of plagiarism. Make sure you make significant differences between your novel and any source material. Go above and beyond belt and suspenders to make sure that you don't create a Twitter storm. What you want are readers, buyers, and fans not to be the subject of a negative BuzzFeed thread. So be careful. An interesting article on a completely different subject is in the most recent issue of The New Yorker, the October 8th dated issue, which basically, it was titled, Can a Machine Learn to Write for The New Yorker? It's all about the strides in artificial intelligence and so-called predictive text. Predictive text is when the software program you're working in guesses what you're thinking and what you're going to write next. Maybe even tries to complete your sentence. This is why perhaps when you're writing texts or even email, I see them all the time. I use email. I start a sentence and I get this grayed out suggestion of how I might finish the sentence, which you can adopt immediately. And if you do, if you right click and take it, then you've just saved yourself a lot of keystrokes. Well, this AI is accompanying primarily for a company called Smart Compose, which is part of Google. And according to their rep cited in this article, Smart Compose saves users about 2 billion keystrokes a week. 2 billion. Think about that. And then think, if AI can predict what I'm going to write next, if it can finish a sentence, could it, for instance, finish a paragraph from a topic sentence? Could it finish a page from a paragraph, or perhaps a chapter? If I gave it my outline, could it write the whole book for me? Which is not necessarily a good thing. Yes, that would save a lot of keystrokes, but I think at that point, we writers might become obsolete, which I hope doesn't happen anytime soon. But the article does discuss the really amazing potential applications for this AI software. For instance, we've talked in the past about translation software. Well, imagine if an expanded version of Smart Compose could translate your book, something which AI programs can do fairly accurately. There are programs now that are translating into a foreign language, and then maybe the editor needs to take another pass or two at the manuscript to clean it up, but saves a lot of time. This could be a great benefit to writers, particularly indie writers, trying to break into the foreign language markets. The barrier there is that it's so hard to get a reliable translation of your book. Well, maybe AI could solve that problem, and maybe it's going to have some amazing applications for writers in the future. So you might want to take a look at this article and check that out. And here are a few quick news bits. There's new research and statistical data on reading from the Pew Research Institute, particularly about reading habits of Americans. One of the articles stemming from the research says 27% of all adults haven't read a book in the past year, and are indicating that this is, showing the decline of literacy. I read this and I thought 73% of all American adults have read a book in the past year. That's a big buying market. Excellent. From the same source, we got statistics indicating that 1 in 5 Americans, that'd be 20%, now listen to audiobooks. It doesn't say how regularly, but they listen to audiobooks, and that's a big increase from just 2016 when it was only 14%. That's actually a huge increase. So we've got people reading books and listening to audiobooks, which is good for Red Sneaker writers. Here's a couple of follow-ups to stories we've covered in the past. We talked about the Audible Captions case. People are objecting to Audible's plan to augment their audiobooks with printed captions. Well, that's going to federal court. A judge is set to weigh in on that case, and really, I don't know what's going to happen. Audible says this is a fair use. Other people saying it's a infringement on copyright. I'll let you know what the judge says. There's also an interesting article in the latest Publishers Weekly, an interview with the new CEO of Barnes & Noble, talking about how he's going to reform this company and try to make it economically viable again. What I thought was most interesting were his thoughts about trying to make Barnes & Noble seem less like, a rubber-stamped corporate, it's the same everywhere kind of entity, and instead more responsive to the local community. Well, if that includes local authors or indie authors, again, that could be a great benefit for Red Sneaker writers. 3 quick cuts from the world of Amazon. Amazon is retiring Amazon giveaways. This was the program that basically let authors accumulate credit, and then you could give away books by sending claim codes out. They're ending that. So if you've got any claim codes, if you've got any credit there, use it quick. Amazon giveaways is going away. They're also ending Kindle Matchbook. That was the program that allowed indie authors, if they wanted to participate in the Matchbook program. They could offer people who, say, bought one version of the book the second version for a greatly reduced price, like buy the ebook and also get the audiobook for $1.99 or vice versa. That's going away, and I don't really know why, and Amazon isn't explaining it. If I were to guess, my suspicion would be that they've decided that audiobooks are too valuable, but I don't really know. At any rate, Matchbook is going away. Amazon has also launched its first Kindle for children. A special kids edition of their e-reader is coming out. It comes bundled with 1,000 books and a lot of other tools and games and whatnot already in it. Obviously, they're trying to capture the children's book market, which historically has not done as well in the ebook realm. There aren't as many people buying children's books as ebooks as in other areas like popular fiction. Of course, if your kid gets a special kids edition Kindle for Christmas, that could change. Last time on this podcast, I posted on the news coming out of the Novelists Inc. convention, a lot of which had to do with the rise in audiobooks. One I didn't mention was Findaway Voices and their new announcements of new markets. Findaway Voices, of course, is an independent alternative for distributing your audiobook if you don't want to use ACX or Audible, the Amazon-owned paths. Then you can use Findaway Voices. They've added a lot more markets like Hoopla, which takes the books into the libraries, and they're also distributing to Apple. Now, in the past, Audible, or ACX, the Amazon-owned distribution units, have distributed to Apple Books. But now Findaway is going to do the same thing, and Apple, apparently getting more aggressive about pushing their audiobooks, has indicated that they'll be taking the feed from Findaway over the feed from Audible. That is, if they're getting an audiobook from two sources, from both places, they're going to take the feed from Findaway. Why? Because the prices are going to be lower in all probability. As you may know, Findaway allows you to set your own price, but Audible chooses the price themselves, and the author or the person uploading the audiobook has no say in it. The price will be based entirely upon the length of the book. So that's why, if you're trying to get the audiobook of, say, The Last Chance Lawyer by William Bernhardt, because who doesn't want that? You go to Audible, it's going to be like $29. But if you go to Findaway, it's always going to be $14.99 unless it's discounted to even less. And that's the feed that's going to go into Apple. This, again, is potentially a big game changer for independent authors distributing their audiobooks. Add that, the news about what's happening at BookBub. I reported earlier that BookBub has added Chirp, CHIRP, which is a way of advertising your audiobooks, just as BookBub has done so spectacularly with ebooks. This program is still in beta, but it's already posting some extremely impressive sales results. So it looks like the future of audiobooks may be just as bright for independent authors as it has been for ebooks. My last news story pertains to a new law coming out of California, California Assembly Bill 5, which you may have read about. It's usually referred to in the press as AB 5. This is the bill that pertains to the so-called gig economy. People who are essentially freelancers, people like Uber drivers and whatnot, who are not considered employees under the law and thus don't get the same benefits as employees, and some people feel they're being taken advantage of. There are also provisions in this law, though, that specifically pertain to freelance writers. Any writer working in the state of California, even if the business hiring them is somewhere else. I'm going to bottom line this. You can go online if you want more details, but the bottom line here is that freelance writers, editors, photographers, or editorial cartoonists can submit 35 content submissions per year to one company without being considered employees,